Hello everyone. Welcome to the YouTube Mall Builders Thursday Night General Hangout. Thursday's hangouts are for the general discussion on mall railroading that we all can set a topic to discuss for the night. Thursday's hangouts are the proud sponsor of the Tuesday night presentations, the YouTube Mall Builders, eMag, and the YouTube Mall Builders live show. I want to say thanks for everybody joining in tonight's show. And here's your host for the night, Johnny Reb of Southeast Rails. Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to Thursday night live chat show. I see we've got some people popping in. Bob, Stu, Tim, Jerry, Greg, how y'all doing? And I hope that's MHP. I believe you said your name was Matt, so hope you're doing well too. Alright, let's see who all we got over here in the panel. We got Jason over here where you see a Coke can and a brown thing. Lloyd's got his boxcar transfer. You like that, did you, Chris? Got Chris.
I love that.
Yeah. Can't recognize. Of course, everybody recognizes Andy. Yeah, Josh, turn that camera on. Leave it on. Yeah, and then we got Josh over here showing his 3-scale O-rail layout here. Yeah, we got Curtis over here. We're showing off a coal tower. And we got AJ working on another N-scale project, I do believe.
Indeed.
Indeed.
We'll convert you yet.
One announcement. We'll notice we're minus one person. That's Dwight North Star Rails. Is that Andy? Yeah, I got an email from him today. Him and his wife ran off to Germany to visit family and friends, and also to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary while they're over there. So they're not, they're not going to be back until sometime around September. So I didn't say this, but get the party hats out. Let's have a party. Nah. We're glad to see Chris when he gets back. Yeah, I know, Tim. I get a little tongue-tied on that 3-rail stuff. O-scale 3-rail. How about that? Does that please you?
I was about to give Tim props on that, on laughing about that too, but that's a tough twister. To say it about 3 times fast, Tim, and then you can pick on him. So
yeah. And good afternoon to you, Marty, down there in Australia. Jerry said, there's a guy who knows how to say yes, dear. Made it 50 years. But tell you what, we'll just go ahead and kick this thing on off. Lloyd, I believe you had a question.
Yes, I did.
I was fixing to think you got camera shy.
It was about operations. My question was, I have 1 yard.
Hang on, Lloyd. Hang on. Josh, mute the mic, please.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah, I have 1 yard, and I've got about 15 industries. And I was wondering, how do we move things around in each industry without having, let's say, a locomotive leave the yard, go all the way to the industry, move a few cars, then come all the way back? I don't think that's the right way of doing it. So, so let me just show you the layout. That way I can explain it better. Okay, here I am sharing.
No, you're not. Not
Am I
yet.
sharing now?
Nope.
Why not?
Now, there.
Just stop sharing.
You have your layout up on the screen already open first.
I see it.
Yeah.
See.
You see it?
All right. Okay, now I see it. All right, now I got you up
Oh, okay.
where everybody can see.
Okay.
Now you got it
My
blown
question is
up.
this.
You got it blown up so we can't see the whole thing. We seeing over by your work desk in the peninsula with a roundhouse. If that's where you're starting.
Do you see? Okay. Do you see where it says post? Where my mouse is?
Move your cursor
Okay.
around to it.
Yeah, that square post right there at the corner where it heads
Where
back
it posts?
into the old office.
All right, yeah.
Okay, so the question is this. I've got a boxcar interchange, which will hold about 3, 6, 9, 12, let's say about 12 boxcars for unloading and loading.
Sure.
And just on the left side of the post, I've got a lumber company. Now, the empties are going to be on this track, and the full one are going inside to be unloaded. Now, who does all the exchange? Who moves the box cars in and out?
Okay, that's pretty big industry anyway. Depending if it's railroad owned and different stuff, there might be like a little switcher of that industry, because in real life they wouldn't be empties on one side loaded on the other track. It would be by spots, or spots like time, because every product has a different spot in the warehouse, or every spotting of the things. They would actually pull them out, sort them, like pretty much big puzzle, really, and you have to spot them in certain locations. They wouldn't be empties on one side drilling that. And with that being a large industry, it might have its own switcher, though with a smaller industry, it would be served by a local turn, or a local freight, or if you're NS, if you're listening to scanner, a lot of times the locals are under C25 or something like that.
So I would I would disagree with that being the case for many of your industries. So typically, or at least what I have experience with, and era determines some of this too. As we get more into the modern era, and as we get the 70s, the amount of traffic on the railroad was still quite high. The number of locals running per day was still quite high. The frequency of trains running a line today is much lower than it used to be. So we've seen things like track mobiles and tractors with knuckles hooked on them in the agricultural part of the country, and remote control switch locomotives that the mine crew run at coal mines. Things like that have happened more in the modern era due to the frequency. So I would say that industry possibly, in the real world, a 12-car industry couldn't. But what you're trying to represent, since that's a quite large industry on your railroad, it could have supported its own local switcher. However, due to its proximity to your yard, I would suggest that you do it as part of the yard master's duty. For the yard master, just run around into that peninsula and make those moves for that particular industry. For the other industries that are further out on your line, I would suggest for those industries that you handle those by the local or the turn or whatever, that you would get a reposition order in your switch list, or a way, or in your, a job to do in a job card system, or however your operating system is you're going to run with. You would get a reposition order that says you need to reposition some equipment. Prototype did it a lot of ways.
Okay, because if you see on the right-hand side of the post, I've got an extra track here, if you want, which is going to be like a waiting track, I guess. Would this be?
So it's two things. One, it's the lead to get a car into your lumber facility. You have to go up in there and push that car up into the lumber facility. Also, there's a little bit of a weirdness with your track plan that makes it a bit of a puzzle. So I don't exactly know how you could get a car in front of the locomotive to actually push it into that lumber facility unless you push it all the way from the yard around there, because you don't have a local runaround unless you use the crossovers on both sides of the lift out and the main line there as a runaround, which would be very restrictive to mainline operation to do that. I'm not saying they wouldn't do it, but they would try to avoid having, you don't have a way to run around. But to get a car in there, you have to get the car on the left side of the locomotive and pull it up, push it up into that track that's up beside the lift out section, back through that turnout into the track adjacent the post, and then push it up in there. It's quite a bit longer track than probably necessary, so you could spot a few cars there, but you know, just to have a spot to throw a few empty cars. But you've also got a grade crossing that you can't block either. So
no, I gotta say though that I changed the plan where the siding, if you want that track, is on the right hand side now. Because
I'm sorry,
I have to do a few fixing. This back here by the road, the first one, is really where the grass is right now. So basically, this line here is on the top, and the top line goes at the bottom.
Oh, well, then how those turnouts, then it's not as exactly where the tracks line up, it's how the turnouts align your track flow. So if you just swapped those two tracks and left the turnouts exactly like they are, that would mean that all 12 or however many box cars fit into your transloading facility, all of those cars would have to be pushed through that kickback to get them into that transloader. That's going to be less than optimal. Let me just say, it's not undoable. It's not that they didn't do it in the prototype, but switching puzzles like that were avoided as much as possible in the real world.
Yeah.
But if a train, if a train has, let's say, 12 cars and he's coming around the corner, okay, goes over the lift out, then backs up all 12 cars, no?
People that take different approaches. I like to do my picks first. Some people would do some picks and then some drops, then some more picks and then some more drops. I like to do my picks first most of the time. You can't always do that, but a lot of times you want to do your picks or what you're going to pick up first so that you're clearing out all the spots. And also, as Josh mentioned, with a transloading facility, that you will often get an order to say boxcar number 5316 is to go to, dock door, C. So you'd have to put it in, align the doors exactly at that point. So it's much easier if you do your picks first and then make sure that all of your dock door positions on your cards are actually open for you to put a car into. So you would stop on the main line. Ideally, it would have been good to have had a passing siding there, coming up the inside of that track all the way around. All the way around that outside curve there, had a short passing siding, so you could have left your train there and freed that inside main line. And also Timothy Wyman, yard limits would often be extended to include an industry like this, so that the yard switcher could go out and do it without having to call the dispatcher, just doing it under yard authority. But you will have to pull your train out on the main line, stop just short of that grade crossing so you don't conflict the grade crossing, and cut your train. Then go up into the transloading facility and do all of your picks. Pick up every car you've got to do. Do any repositioning, like we were talking about. Do any repositioning of cars that need to be repositioned, which would be a quite common occurrence. And then pull your picks out and use your picks as a handle to put your drops, if none of them were too heavy that they could be pushed with an empty car. Because sometimes empty cars can't push loads depending on weight difference. But that's generally us modelers don't take that into account.
No,
I know the initial when I built that building, the initial plan was that I would have a switcher on the right-hand side of the building here. Like you would be parked there because there would be a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
But the fact that this building is near the dock, I'm going, well, really, you know, like the yard should take care of it.
That's my instinct too. Another thing that I often think about, it's good to think about what the prototype would do, what would they do in the real world, especially given your era and stuff. And I'm not saying you could go wrong either way with this because they did different things. But this is not going to be that exciting of a job if that's all you did is sit there and switch those box cars. That's going to get, you know, that's like playing checkers. And we like to play something more complicated, more aligned to chess or something like that. Yeah. It's going to get kind of boring, I think. But if the yardmaster had to, after he had classed some cars over there, if he said, hey, I got to get out on the main line and run for a second, you know, run around there, go switch those cars, that makes his job a little more interesting. So even though the prototype could go either way, I tend to lean to what is more interesting to do as a model operator.
Yeah, so can I share something that will I got something that will explain this. Can I screen share?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you see me screen sharing?
Yep.
Okay. First off, car spots. You see here, there's different types of cars. There will be different doors, and this is the Lance Midnight track plan. If anybody's wondering, so different types of the car is different grades, and that's what the spotting for there. Even though there's it's all boxcar, they might be different kinds of boxcar in that supply. There would be loads empty in the strip, and they would actually have to pull out, switching in. The other thing is, a lot of times, in Akron, there is a yard nearby, about a mile down the road. They still use this industry, so it's not big. It's about that size that he's showing. They still use a track mobile.
When did those come around? Anybody have any idea when the track mobile was? I don't remember seeing them in the 70s, but
they were rare. There were some older prototypes that are now in museums, or 44 tonners would be switching.
That would be, yeah.
And that would actually be what would be operating that industry a lot of times. And the 1957 5T track mobile. The track mobile's been around since is around there. And
47.
Yeah.
Now with the track mobiles and the 44 tonners, there's also one I think they call the Plymouth.
Plymouth was the company who made them. Yeah.
Okay, you know what I'm talking about.
Davenport, Critters.
That's the ticket. Plymouth, yeah.
Yeah, there's also the EMD Model 40, the GE 25 ton, I think it was.
Oh wow!
All right, you done, Josh?
No, the other thing is about the locals or a turn, and sometimes it would be running between 2 yards. So the turn, okay, here's a diagram here. If you guys can see this, this diagram shows a branch line, and it could be on a main line. So the turn comes out of the yard. It would go down here, switch to whatever industry. It's as a needed basics. Pretty much it would run as an extra most of the time, and it would be how much if it's needed. Like if it's all built up, it's needed, it would run. Go up, and then it would go up to the last industry or the last passing sighting, maybe depending on the car capacity, and then it would run around its engine, or there would be, depending on your era, there would be an engine behind you as a push-pull system, and it would then back down to the yard again, going back to its facility or to another yard. It would just go straight to another yard.
Or a Y or something, yeah. But out and back is the key.
Okay. Okay, so my question is, okay, that would solve that problem. But what about the industries are far? For example, got a propane, oil, and sand.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So those are okay.
It would be a turn.
Sorry?
It would be a turn from that yard or a division local, and sometimes depending on how busy the industry, and it might be a really busy one and priority, there might be a unit freight, or depending if they're big. And a lot of times industries would work in zones, like an industrial park would work in zones, and then they would drop off the cars like at a track that then the mainline freight would pick up. So lots, and then or a turn would go out that far, go there, pick up industries, go to the next yard, or go. It works in a division. A division is the line of another of that area or region. It's pretty much that line.
So
All right, I've got a comment here real quick. Turns out that Jerry evidently is the yard master, because his comment is, do not give us yard masters any headaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
in a small yard, they'll do those pickup jobs for local industries. But for all the rest of the industries on the layout, with this abstraction of your of the brewery, with the notable exception of that, because the brewery is the one industry on your layout that could, most likely would, or probably should have a dedicated 44 tonner.
Will.
Yeah, okay. It should.
It will.
The industry absolutely should. For all the other industries, send a local out to do all the drops and give him some reposition moves as a part of his job. You need more stuff to keep them busy with anyway. 17 industries will take you a little while, but if you're going to operate for a few hours, you want some interest, challenge, problems, and reposition jobs are just a big to add.
Okay, one last question. Here, can you see on the left-hand side? I've got my intermodal area. You see it?
Move your mouse
Here?
around.
Completely left on the left.
Yeah, the
Where do you see it?
intermodal would have its own
Right.
train.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
No, that's not my question. That's not my question. Intermodal did not exist in 1970. Okay, so I'm going to be tearing this out. And since there's a little town here at the bottom, I'm going to have a little passenger train station for that little town for my RDC. So what I would do is make a very small yard instead. So would it be better having a small yard there to serve, let's say, whatever is here?
Yeah, maybe. Depending on, and it might be a maintenance yard where they would store some maintenance equipment or a transfer for trucks and trains. Though I do actually want to point out, intermodals do date back to the 50s and 40s with just containers on flatbeds. For the Pensy was
Okay, sorry.
Pennsylvania Railroad.
Yeah, flatbeds, yeah, but not well cars.
No.
And that's all I have.
So I would, if you wanted to, you could put a little add-on yard where maybe the turn stops and or some cars get interchanged with the main line, or it may be just a turn where the turn goes out and back, and then there's a transfer. Actually, if you look at the latest or stored cars, like the cars that the railroad are not using right now, could be stored there. And actually, if you look at the latest Dispatcher issue magazine, they have actually an article about that. That's a question to be answered through that issue of the magazine.
Okay, so my questions were answered, John. So you can go to Chris.
Real quick, the guys over here in the chat, Marty had down in Australia had sent Andrew a email because we hadn't heard from Andrew for a little while, and it seems like Andrew's had another hard issue. So he's under orders to rest from his doctor. So we hope Andrew's going to be getting better here soon.
Gosh, that's awful. He just was getting over one.
Yeah, he. I think he kind of played that down when he was telling us about it.
Yeah.
Well, get better, Andrew, if you're watching.
Yes, sir. Absolutely,
Oh,
brother. Miss you. Even if you do give me a hard time, I miss you, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, just do what the doctor tells you to do, and you'll be around for another day.
Or at least until he pays the bill.
Yeah.
The key to surviving is don't pay your medical bills.
You watching the chat, Andy?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Okay, Andy, coming out of that coal tower
Yes, sir.
in inches before it becomes flat to go into the pit, what would be a realistic distance?
Let's show people what you're talking about trying to do, too. I got a drawing that we'd already looked at, so people get an idea of. Let me zoom this in so you guys can see. So what he's got is a track arrangement that looks, disregard this stuff up here. Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain.
Yeah, back off just a little bit, Andy, see if he'll refocus.
Okay. Let me know it's too small on my screen to tell if I'm in focus or not.
I just stop right there.
Okay.
I'm not sure, but
I'm trying to hold it, so don't make me laugh. So disregard this. That's the track plan for what he's got. 2 tracks under the engine facility. One that is the whatever, where they drop coal. So
not showing up too good, but
oh, I'm sure it's probably not. So scratch me paper. We've done too many doodles on this piece already. This is what I was proposing for him based on what he was saying they did on the prototype he was looking at as the elevation for how it runs. So here at this point, here in the drop house or the shoot house, I think they call it a shoot house. It would be that high, and then it has a fairly steep incline, so they could roll the car back down manually, so they could just let the brakes off from it. Maybe even push it a little bit, although that seems difficult. But let the brakes off some, not all of them. Just roll the brakes back a little bit, and then it'd roll down here. But drop it into a little bit of a pit, and then go back up to grade. And what they'd do is drop the brakes off, so it'd roll, but not freely. It'd roll down into there, just kind of rock back and forth and settle. Then the locomotive could just come by here from this side, right about where that turnout is, and stick his nose down in there, grab it, and go off. But a locomotive could still come through that pit and push up. So we're only talking about dropping an 1/8 inch or something, just enough so you could see that the ties kind of drop down. Anyway, that's what we're talking about doing. That's what he's talking about doing. So
Okay, well, this is about the length I was looking at. If I took this cork like this and brought this cork down, and then from here it would go down the length of the car, and then come back up and back into the turnout here.
So you need
Now,
to
is
come
that
out straight for a touch if you've got the road, because you don't want to twist the turnout. Or my instinct is that that's a bad idea. You want the turnout to stay flat, true, and then right after you get off the turnout, if you have to go right away, go right away. If not, go straight for about 1 inch and then start your pitch. Pitch down into that. And you don't even need a whole car length in that little trough. That whole trough could just be a spot where the track just dives.
yeah, Hillbilly Railroad said 50 to 60 feet from the dump.
Okay. Yep. So
Basically, length of a car, a little more.
Yeah, a little more than a 2-track. Most of the time, in the steam era, they kept using even though they had some 3 and 4 bay coal hoppers into steam era, they kept using, or at least on my prototype and many of the ones I'm more familiar with, they kept using 2 bay hoppers. So for service facilities, 50 tonners or 70 tonners.
Right. I'm going to be using the, I believe they're 36 footers.
Yeah. I mean, generally, for the service facility, generally you want to use the smallest hopper that ran on your line. Because they, generally, but there's no fast and hard rule about this. You can put any kind of hopper you want to in there. Any bottom drop.
Okay, well, if I come out 50 feet, that would bring it out to here before it hits the pit.
Oh, yeah, I would start. I would make. Will you back your camera off just a little bit so I can see the end of that turnout a little bit? So, oh, yeah, you got all kinds of room there. I'd come off that turnout. Yeah, you could come off to that turnout about to where that cut is. So you got that area that's that square that's unpainted. About half the way from the end of the turnout. Right. Yeah, so about half the way from the end of the turnout to the edge of that unpainted square, I would start my dive into the pit. Yep, start shaving it. And then the bottom of your pit would be just past
here.
Yeah, it'd be somewhere from there to there. That's right. And you could have you just want it to be, but what the cool thing is, sand that down some, lay a piece of flex track in it, put a thumbtack through it, run a locomotive over it. And if it looks good that way, then put it there. And if a train will still run over it, put it that way. If it's not dramatic enough, shave it a little more, still run a locomotive over it. That's another reason that I like caulk for putting the flex track down, at least for this particular application, because the caulk would allow, if you needed to raise the track up just a touch to make it work, you could raise it up, the caulk would fill that gap. It'd be fine.
I got a comment here from just another scale modeler. How you doing, Ron? Yeah. Couldn't the scenery do this elevation change to produce the idea that is what is happening? Doing that to your tracks is nice, but it would be a lot of mucking around to get it right. Whereas if you do that with the ditch scenery, you could imply the action. This would be a form of forced perspective.
But you're trying, the only reason that I would argue in favor of doing it with the track in this case. So for other parts of scenery, I agree. That's totally possible to use perspective to manipulate what we do. So for example, if you wanted to keep this whole yard on court, all at the same height, keeping all your tracks flat, you could do that. And then just put a space between your main line of the yard, slope the main line very gently into the court, and then have a very abrupt edge at your court for your main line. So your main line still looked raised and profiled, even though mathematically or geometrically your track is on the same flat plane. You can do that. However, the human eye is incredibly adept at seeing 90-degree angles, parallel and perpendicular lines, and straight lines. So, even very unskilled people can pick up a 2x4, sight down a 2x4, and most people can tell if it's waving. But that's exactly what we want this to look like. You want that wave there. And when you're standing about where this camera is, there's no good way to fake that track diving and pitching. Not to mention that there's an effect on the cars if they're weighted well, so that he could take his coupler pick and, when that car's dumped or whatever, he could take that car and push it and just drop down into that little spot, just like the prototype. It would sit there and stay there till the locomotive went and grabbed it. And when it went and grabbed it, it wouldn't run away from him. There's some physics at play there.
Now, yes.
Exactly. All right, now, before y'all go any further, Stu Structures brought up a really good thought here. With the perspective deception, you would not have to worry with the couplers not properly aligning too, if it physically drops down.
I agree, and Beaker's talking about this earlier too. Number one, you could not do this effect out on an open main line where you're going to be running through trains at 60 miles an hour. That's not reasonable. But on this track, the only time that a locomotive takes a car, takes one car, just one car, takes that one car, pushes it through, pushes it all the way up to the dock and stops and uncouples. So even if the couplers do lock out of position, you're just going to push that car up there. That's it. And when you pick this car up, you only have to pick it up from the bottom of the pit when you run down there and grab the coupler. So as long as you make this slope from the end of the turnout down into that pit, nice and gentle, just like you're coming off of court going down into a flat yard, as long as you do that well, this is entirely operational and functional. But I totally get your point. And anytime you can keep track flat, fine, no problem. But personally, I'm just not afraid to muck around with track as long as the movements are easy, gentle. You can make drastic height elevation changes. Heck, my layout gains 40 inches from top to bottom. But every adjustment you make needs to be very gentle.
Right, and with the cars that I'm going to use, and I've already tried them on here, you know, pushing them around the tracks to make sure that they would run. And if that track was flat, that car would go all the way around the corner and come back into the yard before it stopped. That's how free rolling they are.
There's other ways to fix that too, though. Grass track too.
Right. Well, I'm not 100% sure on this, but it seems to me that before they entered, now this is I'm bringing cars, before they entered that dip, they would uncouple and lock those couples so that they're just pushing.
Yeah, delay.
So that when they get up to the top, they just get out of there.
That's right, delayed uncoupling. Yes,
but right, and for the 5 seconds that you're looking at those couplers uneven when he pulls it out, I mean, that's...
And like the guys are saying in the chat, and we want to make sure, especially for anybody that's watching later, what we're talking about is an eighth to possibly, my number's been 3/16, but eighth to 3/16, no more than a quarter. And if he goes to a quarter, I have a feeling he's going to feel a little of that with caulk. But something like an eighth, 3/16 of an inch of a dip. And while that seems like a lot of trouble and a whole lot of discussion for nothing, it's amazing how much the human eye can see if things are parallel, perpendicular, or straight lines. You will see that eighth inch dip, and there will be an effect caused by gravity to stop that car from rolling away from him. Also, Curtis, if you grass that track up, static grass that track, pretty decent. And if you're still having resistance problems, you know, put some paintbrush bristles down in your static grass too, and that'll keep that car from, you know, when you push it off that dock, from it, you know, rolling into the next tail. So, but
right,
that will help
going to be because it's at the era where the coaling facility is going to be used very little. There's only a couple steams that are actually using it, so it's not like they're having 10 cars of steam coming in there a day, where grass and that stuff wouldn't grow because it'd be a heavily used line. It's pretty much an abandoned line that might get a car every 2 or 3 days or something.
Well, even fairly busy lines would, you know, the coal load out that I'm going to model on mine would have got, you know, a couple cars a week, and this was, you know, this was 2 dozen trades, 3 dozen trades a day branch line. So, but and Rod is saying that too. That's, you know, scenery, using scenery as suggested for that. Even though I'm totally in favor of this dip that you're talking about, I totally think it's worth the effort. I think you'll see those shiny rails sticking up through the grass and see that dip. I think it'll be gorgeous. I don't think you could go wrong doing it. But reinforcing this whole thing with scenery, especially since you're talking about the rundown nature of it, and grassing all this up and making it look dirty. And model railroaders, we all kind of love rusty, dirty stuff for some reason. You know, if you dirt it up right, man, it's going to be beautiful.
Okay.
Well, everybody seems to agree that y'all are in line with getting it worked out and not have a couple of issues, since you're doing a gradual slope in there, and he does have room to move around.
Yeah, well, that's what I wanted, you know, wanted to, before I go start tearing up the base on it, was to make sure this was even going to work.
Well, you got a lot of choices in what you can do there. And I don't think you could necessarily go wrong either way. I think you could totally get a good effect in just scenery, but like I say, sometimes there's just no denying the physics of, you know, manipulating track work. Like I love a main line coming down a high profile and a siding coming off the side and just dipping down in a little bit. And then a lot of people use like HO road bed for the main line and end scale for the siding. And you could totally see that locomotive come over through that turnout and make that dive down into that siding. It's an eighth of an inch, and you could see that very distinctly.
Well, Stu's structure says stand a figure there leaning to one side to exaggerate the effect.
Yeah, that works too.
Do what now?
Take a figure and lean it to one side to exaggerate the effect of the dip.
Oh, okay.
Put a guy standing there with a shovel, you know, standing there leaning on the shovel like a government worker. Sorry, Chris, nothing personal. Stand there, you know, with his arm on his shovel and lean him over a little so it makes this grade even steeper.
I plead the fifth.
Yeah, but if you had somebody standing there with the shovel, wouldn't you have to have another half a dozen guys watching him?
It's 1950, man. Work ethic was a little different. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. They probably the same thing. I'm not sure. Oh, come on. I broke my nozzle off my hairspray bottle. And this was the expensive stuff. That's like $2.
I have one. Do you want? Oh, never mind. You gave me a shot. Never mind.
My wife's threatened me with some serious stuff for her hairspray, but she's got $10 or $12 cans of hairspray. So she says if a tree ever gets made with the hairspray, well, consequences are severe enough that I buy my own Aquanet. Yeah, Tim said no, they'd be the ones working. Yeah, there was a work ethic is just not the same. But I do like the idea of one guy standing there leading. I like anything you can do to kind of enforce something, like using end-scale houses. Forced perspective is, but it's one of those things. Perspective, forced perspective, all of those things, in my opinion, it's like sci-fi movies. If done well, they're great. And if done poorly, they're just awful. The worst thing ever. My favorite type of movie is a sci-fi movie. My least favorite type of movie is a B-rate sci-fi movie. So, and I feel that way about forced perspective and perspective in general.
Have you seen Miles' last video for MR? What is it?
Home on.
Where he's
Trainmaster TV?
Yeah, Trainmaster TV. His last video where you're talking about perspective. He's got that running, not falls, but rapids, and it just goes around a bend, and you can't see where it's coming from.
Yeah, I watched that today, where he used the real slate rock.
Yeah.
And we seen this. He showed us a little bit of this one time on a show he was doing up there when he was originally recording this. YouTube Model Builders members got a sneak peek of what he was doing up there. It looks really good, but I have not watched that yet. I've got to catch up.
Not exactly sure about this, Andy, but Jerry said Andy not a fan of Commander Cody.
I am ever so slightly picky occasionally. Days that ended Y. Um, so yeah, I struggle with some of that stuff.
Yeah.
We actually, YouTube Monobill has actually got a nice advertisement in that show that Lloyd's talking about.
Oh, cool! I got to.
Because he mentioned about when he built the bridge for that module, he did it live on YouTube Monobuilders.
Yeah, he did that show on the community here, and that's when we got the sneak peek of that diorama section.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember if that went out, live on the air or not. I just don't recall, but it was it did look good. And Miles does some first class work. Just actually, if we're talking about scenery, Fred does some first class work.
Yeah. Let's jump over here to AJ for a second. Okay, his fingers are working very feverishly.
Feverish fingers. Interesting choice of words. Okay.
What you building there, AJ?
It's one of the warehouses or industries for my N-scale layout. And it's a combination of Microengineering's Doyle Distribution Center and Pike Stuff's 1 or 2 stall engine house. This is the microengineering part of it. And let's see if I can successfully do a screen share.
Yeah.
I can show you.
Well, oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
Once you get it done, I'll throw it up.
And share. Can you see that?
Yes. I got
Can
you.
the world see that? Okay. So what I'm building is this section right over here in the bottom corner. And this is going to be the Doyles, and this is going to be the engine house. And there's a slight, this is a road that passes under a bridge here.
Uh-huh.
So fortunately, the engine house is slightly taller than the other building, so I can do the elevation change. But rather than have the track go along the side, it's going to go into the building. And I'll take the roof off.
Okay.
All right.
That's interesting.
Just thought I'd work on this tonight as a change of pace from the wood. I need to get around to airbrushing the wood with its first coat of primer, and the weather here has not been cooperative. We've either had 100+ days or we've had humidity and rain, torrential rain. So one of these days I'll get outside.
Yeah, Hillbilly Railroad was saying goodnight. He's going to bed.
See you, Scott.
Sorry if I bored him.
Good night.
What you doing, Jason? You're muted.
Trying to get back onto the tab first, then unmute my mic. Well, I'm taking a Bachmann boxcar that I've had for years, and I took the trucks off, and it had truck-mounted couplers, and I'm gonna put body mount couplers on it, and I'm filling in the where the trucks went so I can screw in a truck.
Yeah. Okay.
Right now. That's
yeah,
about
you've
it.
already done
right
about.
now I'm like.
You've already done about 3 or 4 of those, hadn't you?
On the show, yeah. On the show, I've done about 3 or 4 of them, but I've done more than that.
Oh, okay.
Not being on the show, because I did it years ago before. Right now, I'm trying to let the glue take hold and all that.
Yeah.
Then I'll go in and take my paint pen and paint it black.
Yeah.
And do all that fun stuff.
All right.
Trying to figure out how I'm going to do
Well,
it.
what kind of trucks and couplers you gonna put on there?
Well, I'm going to put KD number 5s on it with KD boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't like the wood 58s or the 58s where the scale couplers are? You just like 5s better?
You mean the 158s? Them are scale, right?
Yeah, well, semi-scale or whatever. I think they might call them scale, but that seems like a gross exaggeration. But still, they're semi-scale. How about smaller?
They're a little bit smaller, yeah.
And a lot of people.
This is a
lot of people prefer the number 5s because they're easier to pick, and they are easier to pick. I just like the 58s or the
the number. Well, yeah. Well, the number 5s are fading away.
Right. Yeah. That's why
the 58s.
Yep. Going to be the state of fair.
Right. Well, the replacement for the number 5 is now the 148 Whisper. It's the exact same coupler. They've just changed the rear end of it to have the whiskers on it instead of the wire that they used to have on.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so it's two things. That's awesome because the whiskers are infinitely better. But also to any of us, I've got to get a collection of those little box springs, those little copper box springs, because they're sprung copper, so they make really good electrical contacts to put in a caboose or caboose for lighting or for passenger car equipment for putting lighting in. That's the best way is take those brass springs and cut them up and make contacts out of them. So I need to buy some of those while they're still around.
Talking about that right there.
Yes, that thing right there. So if you take the two ends off from it and take it's got two sides that are loose and bend them out like wings, and then take your nippers and cut the section with the hole in it off so you have a little flat tab with two little things headed out both directions. Glue that down to the top to the bolster of the truck and let the two little tabs hang down both sides and put those right against your wheels. You get that's one of the it's cheap and you get great electrical contacts. You could take a set of cheap trucks and turn them into $20 electrical contact trucks instead of buying them. So
How you doing, Professor? He said phosphor, bronze, drift gear springs, great for truck mounted pickups.
yes, that's what I'm talking about. I was calling it wrong, not calling it correctly yet. Leave it to the prof. It's not like any professor to make sure our language is correct. But and for anybody watching later, Google Harold Beekwitz Pacific Coast truck pickup. I've seen I'm sure that's where I got that from years and years ago. But that is a dirt cheap way to get electrical contact, and it works great because it's that phosphor. It's a sprung phosphor bronze, so it has some tension on it.
Yeah, Prof said also work great as drag adding for improving coupler behavior.
Yeah, man. Add some resistance to the. You want most of your cars to be fairly free rolling, but having your caboose have some resistance on it, help you pull slack back in a trade. Remember that layout we went and visited? Stan. What was his last name? Had the first time I come down there, we went and visited that fellow's
Norman Stencil.
Norman Stencil, that's right. Well, that's pretty far from Stan, but okay, Stencil. Yeah, Norbert Stitzel. He used a pad under every caboose to not exactly clean, but to just wipe the track all the time. And part of the reason was for the track cleaning benefits, but also a big plus is that extra drag that it put. So having electrical pickups in all of your caboose also is, seems like a positive move. Yeah, Prof says adding the phosphor rods drag doesn't kill the free rolling. It literally adds just a hair of drag. It absolutely, sure does. It's not a big deal. If a trade was going to run away on a grade, it's still going to run away on a grade. But if you have a gentle spot where a trade would almost set still, but if you just bump it, it'll roll. Those will stop that behavior. Make it easier to couple to. And since you're going to have to drop the tail of your trade, caboose in a few cars, and do the things that Lloyd was talking about, running around and making your picks and drops, having those phosphor springs in your caboose not only let you light them up and put decoders in them and put marker lamps on the back or for Freds or EOTs, the little red flashing light on the rear end of a modern train. You need those electrical contacts. That little bit of drag helps.
All right. Jerry's asking any opinions on which couplers do not work well with MT.
Okay. What's MT?
You got me.
That's what I was wondering.
I'm likely to have an opinion because that's my nature to have an opinion.
Well, let's give Jerry a moment to tell us what MP is.
MT. Microtrains.
Oh, microtrains? Yeah, microtrains.
So probably in scale.
That's in scale. And Jerry confirmed microtrains.
Any thoughts, AJ? Because you're raised an in-scaler, brother.
I've got everything from Rapido to microtrains, couplers, and the horrible things that Kato puts on their RDCs. I've not gotten around to deciding on what couplers to standardize on, but it'll probably be the MT because that's the most like the KD numbers 5 and whatnot.
Well, they're on more equipment that's out there. Microtrains is spread wider than anybody else. It's something that I would defend that Joe Fugate has recently said, talking about this TOBA layout that they're talking about, that you guys were talking about, that recent release of that recent video that Miles had done. Early on, talking about this layout, he had worked in industrial standardization and quality assurance. And in quality assurance, one of the best ways to get quality assurance is standardization. Standardization from a single vendor or supplier or product type or whatever. And for most people, for a lot of people, you can mix and match stuff and you can work out the physics to make the turnouts all work together. But for a lot of us, it is just easier to just buy all of your track from the single manufacturer or something. And I don't always agree. If you have some experience, you can make any track work together. If you can file it, straighten it up, and get everything right, no problem. But that's one area where I have to agree with him completely. You cannot go wrong with, and I think it is much to your advisement, to use a single manufacturer of couplers, regardless of scale or whatever. If you just picked one manufacturer and one type, it is going to work better. They can claim KD compatible all they want.
Yeah, I think the prof's comment here kind of sums that up too. Is MT to MT equals okay. MT to Accumate equals allegedly okay with less slinky effect. So yeah, keep it pretty much the same manufacturer, you'll have less slinky effect.
Yeah, that's one of my big things that I despise about KD. And I moved to these surgeon engineerings for a lot of reasons, the cosmetics and how they function, how prototypical they are. But one of the big pluses for me was that they don't have a lot of slack. So a train of 25 cars, 26 cars like I like, that would have 2 inches of slack in inch and a half or 2 inches of slack on KDs. But a 25 car trade has less than a half inch of slack in it, maybe even a quarter inch of slack in it for the whole trade with my surgeons. They just barely move, which is great with helpers because the slack can't get ahead of you. It also makes it, you got to watch it a lot closer too. So, but.
Well, like you were saying, I think that goes along with everything on the railroad. If you're using Atlas track, stay with Atlas track. If you're using microengineering, stay with it. You're just going to have less headaches and a better looking layout when you get done.
Well, it depends on experience. You know, if you've built a few layouts, if it's not your first layout, then you understand what to deal with, and you could take a file and you could straighten up the differences in the rail profile, and you could make the physics work. But if you don't have a lot of experience and it's one of your first layouts, standardize and make your life easier, because the quickest way to get out of the hobby quickly is to start doing some kind of crazy stuff on your first layout, and it never run right, and you end up hating the hobby. So,
well, I can tell you, Curtis, that all my tracks are flex track from Atlas, but all my turnouts are Picos.
Yeah. Jerry said, okay, MT all the way, thanks. Kind of sounds like Mark there.
And yes, no, mine are, I'm using the Atlas track, but my turnouts are all
Jody Industries.
Yes.
Sorry, I enjoy Jody Industries LLC too. So.
Yeah.
Their rail profile, it's just the physics of it. You know, flex track is, for the most part, flex track is flex track. Microengineering, the profile of microengineering rail and the profile of Atlas rail is a little different. But go buy you a handful of Atlas custom lines and a couple of the Atlas, whatever this higher end line they've got now is, and a couple Shinoharas and 4 Picos, and hand lay one, and buy one off a vendor that was on Trusco Road Bed from 1960, and see how much fun you have. So, how about less variability?
Yeah, I think I'm starting to get the hang of these turnouts.
I would hope so. You've got a bunch of them already.
Oh, I'm telling you, that second batch you did, man, those are excellent. Not that the first ones aren't any good. It's just,
yeah. See, I even let that alone.
Yeah, cosmetically. I mean, the first ones, yeah, as far as performance goes, yeah, they'll work just fine. Cosmetics on it, yeah, I had a little more to be desired. I'll admit to that.
I mean, it's not nothing to do. I would.
Yeah, this. I said these last.
Go ahead, brother.
Oh no, I ain't cut off.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'm sitting here. Did I cut off?
No, we got you. We got you.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, when I started talking, I was going to say, I'm sitting here filing down this cork to put the angle on for the lift. And I've got a big pile of this stuff laying on the floor. And all I can think about is a video that I watched where the guy collected it all and used to fill in his little gaps in the cork road bed.
A lot of British modelers
buy it. I got a pound of it sitting here.
A lot of British modelers buy it by the sack.
Just the powder?
Yeah, as scenery material. They glue it down and paint it. I don't know about a lot. I've seen it done on YouTube videos.
Huh.
And they just buy cork grinds in a sack, put them down.
All right, Andy.
Sure.
Got a question, Ralph here. What species of tree is that? Prof said deadwood.
Yeah. You know, it actually started out, I was going to use it. It was albeit kind of awry. It was being over funny. I actually took this one after I glycerined it, which glycerin does a lot of things, preserves them, but it rubberizes, for lack of a better word. It makes them fairly limber, so you can stretch them. So I bent it around all bonsai-like, and stuck it up with, you know, with a bunch of sticks in it, like it's hold up Frankenstein's head. And use some contact cement to glue in the inside of it to kind of pull it back together again, because I needed a tree that was really, you know, high detail, high quality, but was basically flat, because I make flat trees to go right, you know, near the backdrop. And as I was talking to the guys, I've got a couple earlier we were talking, I've got a couple areas where I won't ever put the track right against the backdrop. It's always got to be at least a few inches away so I can put scenery there. And anytime it's close, I always put a cliff line or a fairly steep hillside, I mean, if that's what was there on the prototype, since I'm modeling a prototype place. But I always design for whenever I need to make compromises to stretch and I go really close to the back, I've got to be able to put a cliff line there. So I need some pretty good looking trees at the top of it so I can, you know, whatever.
I know you're busy at not watching the chat, but Prof said after that, deadwood is the predecessor to dead rail.
Well, the problem with dead rail to a whole other extreme with his little dead wood layout. It's one thing to go battery operated on microengineering rail or even flex track, but on sticks of wood or wood, you know, that's just that's intense. And you guys want to pick on me for being a little over the top. That's just awesome.
Yeah, Prof said glycerin does not kill the plant. It literally substitutes for the water in the plant cells, thus keeps flexibility and original color, but arrests the plant's growth.
Okay, I mean, it's not going to grow anymore. So, but everything I'd heard about it said that, I mean, to make it stay natural. Now, I will say I did an experiment to see if it would keep my. I grind up leaves to put it for the forest floor, like out of the backyard. So they're incredibly cheap. And they make the best looking forest floor material I've found. So I shave them up and scrape them and put it down. I tried soaking them in glycerin and thinking that may stop, or maybe not stop. How about slow the deterioration process that happens with the leaves glued down? And no joy. They lose their color when they're glued down. So I've got to come back and color those. So I'll have to take a few mixes of dilute acrylic paint or something. They're glued down good with Mod Podge with a, good artist medium. So they should have a good surface, good surface teaching on them. So I think I can come back with a wash of acrylics to brighten some of the leaves up. I don't want to do that much anyway, just around the forest edge where the light's hitting it. So probably won't be a big deal. But for anybody working with glycerin or even probably the super tree material, I'd probably glycerin those too. I just spray paint all mine so it seals them.
Yeah, the professor says works best for freshly cut plants. Kind of like, I can't pronounce the first one, but asparagus fern. Not appropriate solution for leafy plants.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's for the trunk material, for ant seed.
Yeah, you says you got different kind of plant cell structures.
That totally makes sense, and I meant to do some more research on this, and I'm prone to massive deep dives on research. When I got fascinated with spray glues, I read I've said this a dozen times probably, like an 11 or 12 page document from Stanford University on the adhesive properties of hairspray, and learned a few things you could do to improve hairspray massively by bringing the temperature up on the hairspray and stuff. So, I'm prone to do that, but I haven't studied enough on glycerin yet. I need to. But nothing stops the leaves from breaking down. It's just going to happen. But the natural dirt that I use seems to hold its flavor. I also found that it sands really interestingly. Once you've glued it down really hard, if you'll sand it, you can sand in wear lines for like a dirt road where track lines in.
Oh, he said, Andy, this is 20-year knowledge, known info from Maulers down here. Google Swans Crossing.
Why's it got to be Google? What do you got to get DuckDuckGo? And if you take it upon yourself to put being out of business or something, I'm just messing. I think I have seen this Swans Crossing Glass somewhere, but it's also apparently a TV show.
Yeah, dirt tends to hold its flavor. Andy, what are you not telling us?
Modeling. It's all flavor. It's all what we're all trying to capture. I don't care how die-hard prototype or not. Just try to capture a flavor.
Okay, Andy.
Sir.
Now this is just a piece of track. But that would be the elevation coming down off of the thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's not very steep at all.
And then it would go further into the pit.
Yeah. And a lot of that is the easement where it's easing. It's that vertical easement where it's easing into that.
Into the pit.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the ones I've seen had a fairly sharp climb on them. I mean, they're a good 12+% grade. They're crazy steep. But
Yeah,
they're a car lake, so.
Yeah, looking at that, I don't think he really needs to dig out the layout base at all. That gives him a pretty good dip right there, don't you think?
Well, the reason to dig.
Well, the other track is at that same level. So once it came down, it's going to go straight.
If you don't dig it, the reason we come to the conclusion of digging it out was twofold. One, that's what they did on the prototype. So I tend to de facto come back to that. Number two, and the most important reason was with that incline on there, if he takes and kicks a car with his pick, it'll roll down that incline and for another 12 feet. So we were trying, which you could solve that by just grassing the track and poking a couple holes, put some paintbrush bristles in there that drag on the axles, give it that drag and that resistance. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat, but putting that dip in there looks awful cool because it's what the prototype did. You'd also do some cool things like pour a little resin in there, like it's kind of muddy, like you've got a pool into there, or pour a little
Well, you
bottle.
see that's what I was thinking. If you remember the video that Kathy Mullet did on that cracking mud in that swell.
Yeah.
Where it's like mud because it's a dry season, but it's all cracked and.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to give it texture.
Yeah. Prof has got here. The other track may be the same level, but if that camera support sags much more, we'll be looking at the floor.
Okay, that lost me.
If you put much more sag in there and follow it with a camera, you're going to look at the floor.
Oh, okay. No, just a little bit more, and then it would come in and tie into that turnout right there.
Yeah, so you're going to take that cork there to the left and file it down just a little bit more, make that a little more gradual, or you're going to keep it sharp?
I wouldn't worry personally. I wouldn't worry about.
Well, that's what I'm trying to debate.
Oh yeah.
Well, you see, it's already up on over here
on a riser.
it's already up on an incline to start with. So when this is put in, I've just almost doubled that dip. What did I do with the actual track that fits in there? Man, I just had it. How could it disappear?
Up against the wall. Is that it against the view block?
And I know the wife hasn't been in here, so I can't blame her. No. No, this was just a piece I was using to see if how much bend it would actually. Oh, here it is, right here, right under my face. Okay, this goes in, fits in like that. So right now we're looking at that.
Yeah, it's way too shiny. We can't read the ruler.
We're just taking it from a 0. And I don't know how to figure an actual incline, but
Give me
we're coming up 4 feet to the top of the. Okay, well, it's coming up 4 feet to the top of the rails from ground 0.
Pretty nice. And if you drop in the pit,
So it's got a 4-foot incline.
And if you'll drop into that pit about 18 scale inches,
the length of it is for that whole section 50 feet. Yeah, it's not going to have to go much, just enough to hide the rails. Right, just so the top of the rails are showing.
Yeah, you just want it to be a shallow,
which would be
a 1.5 scale feet or something. Enough
to tie to the top of the rail is about I'm just gonna, that's just basic, like I said, maybe an 1/8 the most.
Prof said
and then
it's
that
probably
would
going to be
leave
around
me
8.3. Prof said it'll probably be around about 8.3 grade.
See, that's not so steep by prototype standards for those kind of, particular places you're showing.
That's pretty steep.
Yeah. I mean, Prof had 50-foot run divided by 4-foot rise equals 1 in 12 or 8.3.
On the prototype, though, 12% wouldn't have been uncommon. 12 or plus, you're only shoving wood hopper, wood locomotive, which normally pulls hundreds or of tons, or if not thousands of tons. It's only going to shove 50 tons to the top of that, and it's only a car length in grade, so it gets a little run and go. Especially with good sound locomotives, you can crank that thing up, and whoa, that's what they did. They cranked them up and dove through there, and shoved them up there real quick. Shouldn't be a big deal. Probably really interesting. Also, I got this stuff I want to mention. You were talking about Crackle. I bought that stuff that Kathy Millett showed. I couldn't find it because it's a small bottle from Citadel. That's what she used. I bought a bottle of it. It's exceptional. But you almost need a magnifying glass to see it, and I've got pretty good vision. I've got glasses, but with my glasses, I test with pretty good vision, and I can't see it unless it's on the edge of the layout. I did it on a section that's a foot back. There's no track in front of it. It's straight up a stream, and I can't see it unless I get my head up in between the trees to look. But I bought this, so sometimes there's an advantage to exaggerate a little bit. I bought this stuff from Folk Art. This is like $1, maybe 2 or 3, not much, and it's a Crackle underlayment paint, whatever. So you put that down and then paint your brown color over it, and it'll crack underneath. I even painted glue and spread dirt over it, and it'll crack the actual mud.
Is that that craft type crack?
Yep. folk art, acrylic, cheap. You know, I mean, I don't have a price tag on it, but I mean, it's that same apple barrel kind of, you know, this kind of crap. But it was a couple bucks. So
Okay, so it's
a shot, and it has a great effect. It's not, you know, it's not a finessed, really fine detail thing. But it's great for an effect. So for like doing that bud, like we're talking about, where that would drop down like that, and where that dropped down, that when they push that coal hopper over, and it goes down there and rattles all the coal that was setting on the edges and it was kind of rattling around but didn't drop down the chutes or something, that's all going to fall out there. So you're going to have coal and it's you know, you've got an ash pit nearby and sand house close and all the service facilities and cinders. It's going to be a dirty, mucky place. So crack, dry, mud, earth, coal, muck, and little water in there would be quite interesting.
Okay, so that stuff is folk art, cracked.
Crackle medium. Folk art.
Crackle medium. Has it got a color to it or no?
Nope. It's like an underlayment paint. So you, which you can see through. If the crack is pretty pronounced, you can see through it. So I would probably paint it, you know, dark gray or something, some kind of darkish color. Maybe not black, but black would be okay too. Paint down a fair layer, you know, a coat of this. And then paint and sift fine, you know, whatever you use for sand. If you use or for the dirt like that, like you'll need like grout. I would recommend using grout or dirt, and then it'll crack. Leave it to the prof.
Yeah, prof says, my wife has always said mile railroading was addictive. Now we're talking crack.
Yes, sir. There's a good internet meme about model railroaders that would suit this occasion. But, a little picture of a layout. We'll have to show that sometime. Yeah, this stuff works though. Cheap too.
Well, the next time I'm at a craft store, I'll check it out. And,
I don't.
Because I was never able to find that stuff that she used, and I know Michaels and Hobby Lobby, they sell a two-part formula that's supposed to crackle, but that stuff's like $10 to $15 a bottle.
Well, that Citadel bottle.
And I wasn't about to spend that kind of money.
Absolutely. Well, that Citadel bottle I bought, and I've got to find it. It's not a very large bottle either, and it was more than $10. I'm quite sure, and plus shipping somewhere. I had to order it from somewhere, and it's a good effect. I love it. I will use it again, but it's a subtle effect. It's a subtle effect. So an area like you're talking.
And this is going to be. Yeah, this is going to be what, a foot away from the edge, and then figure you're standing, your head's probably another half a foot. So
yep.
At 18 inches, it's got to be something where you can see it.
And you're looking down through grass and muck and across locomotives and everything. So there's times that we need either the strongest effect that would occur naturally, or we need to do overemphasize, you know, like our lengthy discussions on ballast. I use, as precise as I try to be, I use slightly overscale ballast because it looks more particulate. If I use the correct size of ballast, it looks like sand, because it is essentially sand. Sand is pretty close to correct ballast size.
You're using tile mortar, right?
I use a little bit of unsanded grout so that I get the Portland cement, latex polymer adhesive, and mostly for the pigment. Because I use white grout, unsanded grout. So it's just the whatever, Portland cement, the coloring agent, and the latex compound. And I mix that with decomposed granite. Buy it in a big old bag, call it leveling sand, or leveling whatever, that you would put down before you put pavers down in your garden. And then I screen that out and get the really small. We've showed that a bunch of times. talked about that probably too many times.
Yeah, we're gonna be switching topics here real quick and then wind it up.
Yeah, I don't know where that is anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about it another time, Andy. No problem.
Alright, Jerry up here is, let me get back up here, see if I can find where he was. Oh, he asked, has anyone used LED strip lights like those sold by Micromart? Prof has sent him over to Mall Railroad Hobbyist to look that up. Then Prof says M&M price looks reasonable, but LED strips can be had cheaper. So
Gotta be careful though. They vary massively in quality. From
I was going to say the same thing, because I bought the cheap ones from China, and then I went to an electronics store and bought another one that was almost twice the price, but it was also twice the what do you call it? Luminescent.
No, Lumos.
Yeah. So, yeah, you could go cheap, but then you'll get whatever you pay for.
And there's good ones out there on eBay. They won't be the cheapest, absolute dirt cheapest price, but if the cheap ones are going for $6 or $7 for $10, you'll find one that people commented on. I just don't see how you could get away from doing some research or just spend the money. Otherwise, your chance of getting something you won't be happy.
Didn't one of our members put up all the lights and within a year they burned out because he bought the cheap ones?
I haven't heard of it.
And he had to replace them.
I don't remember anybody doing that.
I don't either. Troy, Lee Boston.
Somebody. It might have been Lee. It was whoever it was is one that has the 4 or 5 pin underneath to run the lights.
Troy.
But anyhow, he had bought the cheap ones and they burned out about a year later.
Yep.
I'm not.
So, yeah, like you said to me, I would spend the extra couple dollars because LED lights should not burn out.
Well, the key to LEDs, whether
not within a year,
whether it's structure lighting,
I would think you get 5 or 10 years.
The key to LEDs, whether it's in your structures, in your railroad equipment, your locomotives, rolling stock, or over your layout, this is just the technology. The key to LEDs is very well governed current set to those little devices. If you hook them to a rheostat dimmer and are adjusting that all the time, if you hook it to a flaky power supply or one that's finicky, you're going to lose LEDs. When they say LEDs will last you a lifetime, they mean well regulated. So you can get like these little power supplies. You can do it off computer power supply too, but you can get these little power supplies like that. That's like $8 or something off of AliExpress or one of those places. They're cheap. You could buy one of those power supplies and properly regulate that thing, or you could buy a Woodland Scenics hub. I think those are great for people that aren't using Arduinos. I think they're the ideal way to do it. They're cheap, they're well governed, and you will get a heck of a lot of life out of your LEDs. But you could use those big power supplies just like Troy did. That's the supplies Troy used for his layout, and he's been burning them for over a year now. And there's some bright head to turn them down a lot. So it can be done. It's a good way to do it. But the key to LED lights, for anybody who's looking at doing that, the key is the throw distance. LEDs don't have a lot of throw distance. So if you have a layout at 40 inches and your ceiling's at 8 foot, you're going to need a lot of LED, like 3 or 4 strips probably.
That's why you need a valance.
That helps, but a lot of people like Rod Kleiss put his up, and he has 4 strips, but he's got like a And that's not even blue, I don't think. He just has like a warb or 2 warbs and 2 cools over the section that's not double decked on his layout, over the yard section, because it's like a 4-foot throw. And to get enough light there, you have to. So, and Ron Clays has a good video from several years ago on his YouTube channel. Let me point the guys to one more. Mike Deverall. He did on Mike Deverall's channel, he did a deep dive on layout lighting. And why he went with LED bulbs, still LEDs, but with bulbs and fixtures. But he talks about cans and fluorescence and strip lighting and all those types in about a 25 or 30 minute deep dive into where they excel and the cost. He costed out each solution and how much it costs for each one, where they excel, and the big throw is where LEDs fall down.
All right, what you got there, AJ?
I'm not using it for lighting, but I'm using it for accent lighting. It's got it at Home Depot. It's an LED strip that has color changing, so you can do any color, and it kind of just adds a mood light to the N scale layout when I fire it up. So this is like one other option if you want to do like a nighttime blue or daytime with the white, or even like a slightly overcast. Go with the color changing in some areas. Might be too expensive for the entire layout if you have lots of space like some of you guys do, but if you've got a small little layout, this is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'm going to put wood RGB along my layout and a couple whites. That wood, because I don't need a lot of bright blue, but then I can have a green
actually
sunset.
What it is, he's not lighting the layout at all. He said just wanted to put under the roof over the truck doors at my distribution center. And he said thanks all.
Then he needs a very, very short ribbon of light.
I would
yeah.
I would look at fiber optics, because fiber optics is so small that it would help. I mean, you could use LEDs, but depending on what scale you are.
Well, just trying to get away from you guys. I've talked a bunch. I'm gonna let you guys run with it, but light pipe is what, like those cheap fiber optic. If you go to the dollar store and buy a little lamp that looks like a sunflower with a bunch of things hanging off of it, buy it, and don't worry about the old women behind the counter laughing at you for buying the sunflower. Buy it, chop it up. I have a hard time calling that fiber optic because I'm in the IT industry, and glass strand fiber optic is almost useless for model railroading purposes. There's a few cases, but they're pretty rare. But that, what they call fiber optic lamps, which is what light pipe. It's what Ather did for years with a bulb and a big square, you know, whatever, strand of acrylic going up to some lights. But light piping works. Totally useful.
Yeah. All right. Well, we done hit the 1.5 hour mark. Done slip past it a little bit. So I think we're going to wind this one on down now. Stu Structures just had to leave out a little while ago. He said thanks for the show and the conversation. I want to thank everybody that's participated in tonight's chat over here. Professor, always good to see you. I want to thank Jerry for coming in, your questions. Yeah. Hope everybody enjoyed tonight's show. So let me get over here where I can do my little magic manipulations here. But alrighty, I want to thank everybody here in the panel too for coming in tonight. I think we've had a really good show. A lot of good topics talked about here. Good general topics from one to the other. I want to just say go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com. There you can check the schedules for the Tuesday, Wednesday shows. Those shows are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern. The Thursday and the Saturday shows, they are at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern time. Thursday shows are every week, And the Saturday show is once a month. It's usually the third Saturday of the month. That's with Big Bill and Barry. Also, want to say click on the eMag and be sure and sign up for email notifications, so when the eMag comes out, you'll get notified. The eMag just came out here a few days ago. JD and his team have hit another one out of the park. They got a good issue this month. A lot of electronic stuff in there. So you want to be sure and check that one out if you're ever considering any kind of electronics. They give you a lot to think about there. I want to say thank you for joining in tonight. And we shall catch you in the next show, which I believe is going to be next week. We got an Arduino workshop coming up on Wednesday with Chris Hiley. So we'll be sure and check on that one. So we'll see you next week. Have a good weekend. Talk to you later. Bye.